Picture a 10-year-old boy, completely alone, surviving in a tiny, crumbling shed for 2 whole years. No family, no friends, no one to notice his struggle. Just him fighting to stay alive. Then, out of nowhere, a wealthy millionaire storms in and yells, "Let him go." What could have driven such a dramatic confrontation? And how did this child's life change in an instant? The sun had barely risen, but for most children, this would mean the start of a new day filled with laughter, school, and games. Not for him. For 10-year-old Alex, every day was a battle for survival. He lived in a tiny, dilapidated shed at the edge of a forgotten property, a place the world had seemingly erased from its maps. The wooden walls were warped and cracked, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the floor was littered with remnants of old newspapers and broken toys that once belonged to someone else. Alex hadn't always been alone. Once, he had a home, a family, and laughter that echoed through hallways. But life had turned cruelly fast. Circumstances he could barely comprehend had left him abandoned, with no guardian to care for him and no one to notice his absence. The neighbors rarely came near, and the occasional passerby assumed he was just another stray child who belonged to the streets. Hunger was his constant companion. Some days, he managed to scavenge scraps from nearby dumpsters or old leftovers tossed behind stores. Other days, he went to sleep with an empty stomach, his tiny frame curled up against the cold, biting wind. Water came from a leaking pipe that dripped slowly into a rusty bucket, and he learned to ration it carefully, knowing that too little could mean dehydration. But the hardest part wasn't the cold, or the hunger, or the uncertainty of shelter. It was the silence. The deafening quiet of solitude pressed against his ears like a weight he could never lift. With no one to talk to, Alex's thoughts became loud, his fears magnified in the shadows. Nightmares blended with reality. Every creak of the shed sounded like a lurking predator. He had no one to rely on, no one to reassure him, and yet he survived. Somehow he endured. Somehow he held onto the smallest flicker of hope that someone, someday, might notice him. Little did he know that someone was about to arrive, a figure of wealth and power, whose sudden appearance would shatter the walls of his hidden world and set the stage for an unbelievable confrontation. By the second year of his hidden existence, Alex had become a master of survival. Every sound outside the shed had meaning. Footsteps could signal danger. A car passing too slowly could mean someone was watching. He knew how to move silently, how to hide when necessary, and how to make a meal from almost nothing. A cracked tin can become a pot. Old newspapers turned into insulation, and scavenged boards patched the worst leaks in a shelter. Every day was a careful calculation between risk and reward, and Alex became both cautious and clever beyond his years. Hunger still haunted him, but he learned to be patient. He observed patterns in the neighborhood. When the trash trucks came, which stores discarded their leftovers first, and even the occasional kind stranger who left scraps behind without noticing. He rationed every crumb, every drop of water, learning the precise balance between survival and waste. Hunger was never fully gone, but it was manageable, and in a strange, quiet way, it gave him purpose. Yet the emotional toll was far heavier. The loneliness pressed down on him like the thickest fog, leaving him anxious, fearful, and sometimes angry. He would talk to imaginary friends, whisper stories to the shadows, and replay memories of his old life over and over. Sometimes he would step outside and watch children play from afar, feeling a sharp pang of longing for a normal life he couldn't remember fully. Nights were the worst. Darkness amplified every fear, every imagined threat. He learned to ignore the constant whispering of doubt in his mind. No one cares. No one will come. Still, Alex's spirit remained unbroken. Every day, he reminded himself that he had survived this long, and survival was, in itself, a triumph. His cleverness, resilience, and quiet determination kept him alive when the world had turned away. Little did he know that all of these skills, honed in secret over 2 long years, would not just save him. They would play a role in the shocking encounter that was about to unfold. The day that changed everything began like any other. But within hours, Alex's hidden world would collide with a power and influence he had never imagined, altering the course of his life forever. It was a quiet afternoon when the world Alex had built around himself suddenly cracked. He had been perched near the shed's small, grimy window, watching the distant street, when a black luxury car rolled to a halt on the property. The sound of its engine was unfamiliar and commanding, different from the cars and trucks he had learned to anticipate. Heart pounding, Alex ducked behind a pile of old crates, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Out of the car stepped a man who seemed impossibly tall and imposing, dressed in clothes that gleamed in the sun, carrying an air of authority that made even the birds stop mid-flight. Alex had seen wealthy men on television, but seeing one in real life was different. This man radiated power, someone used to being obeyed, someone who commanded rooms with a glance. But what brought him here? Why had he stopped at this neglected property, where no one would expect to find a child hiding in a crumbling shed? Before Alex could retreat further, the door of the shed was flung open. The man's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, "Let him go." The words were explosive, echoing in the tiny space like thunder. Alex froze, unsure whether he had heard correctly. The millionaire's presence, the sheer intensity of his voice, made it clear this was no ordinary visitor. There was a sense of urgency, a sense that the boy's life was not just at stake, but that justice itself demanded immediate action. Suddenly, the surreal reality of 2 years of isolation collided with the real world. Hands that had never touched him reached for Alex, guiding him out of the darkness of the shed into sunlight he hadn't fully felt in years. The smells of fresh air, the warmth of the sun, and the sound of voices other than his own flooded his senses. The boy who had lived in the shadows was now thrust into a world that seemed impossibly large, bright, and full of opportunity, yet terrifying all at once. This moment, the millionaire's explosive intervention, was the pivot point. The years of hardship, ingenuity, and resilience that had kept Alex alive were about to be recognized, and his life would never be the same. In an instant, the lonely shed became a memory, and the boy who had survived against all odds stepped into a future that promised hope, protection, and the chance to truly live. Alex's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Alone, hungry, and forgotten, he survived against unimaginable odds, not just through luck, but through courage, intelligence, and sheer determination. And in the end, it took one moment of intervention, one person willing to step in to change his life forever. It makes you wonder, how many hidden struggles go unnoticed every day? How many Alexes are out there, fighting to survive without anyone seeing their pain? Stories like his remind us to look closer, care more, and never underestimate the strength that exists in even the smallest, quietest individuals. If Alex's journey moved you, take a moment to reflect on the power of compassion and action. And if you want to discover more incredible stories of courage, survival, and life-changing moments, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and join us as we uncover more extraordinary tales from the world around us. Remember, sometimes the smallest voice can survive the hardest circumstances, and sometimes it just takes one person to make the impossible happen.